And we are live.
Fantastic. Good evening and welcome to the October 28th, 2021 Design Commission regular video meeting. It is 6:04 p.m. and the Design Commission meeting is now in session. I am Anthony Perez, a Design Commissioner. Tonight's virtual Design Commission meeting is being brought to you using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video in this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel. Interim CPD Director Jeff Thomas, Principal Planner Tim McHarg, and other staff members are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on whenever City Clerk Andrea Larson conducts a roll call during the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Clicking too many buttons. Let's see, Vice Chair Brandt is absent. Commissioner Grambois?
Here.
Commissioner Ladigan?
Here.
Commissioner McPherson? Oh, I can't hear you, Claire.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Here.
Commissioner Perez?
Here, present.
And Commissioner Czar.
Here.
And then I'd also like to note for the record, we also have Parks and Recreation Commissioner Jody joining us tonight as well.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioner.
For this meeting, we continue to utilize the Zoom platform. I'll do my best to recognize you in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you can ask your questions. Commissioners, as we've been doing, please limit yourself to one question and one clarifying question so that each commissioner has a chance to ask questions before the next round of questions by commissioners. The first item on the agenda is special business for the election of the chair and the vice chair.
Yeah, this item here, we haven't met in a while. So normally this is an exercise that would take place a few months earlier on the calendar, but we're going to cover it here tonight. Andrea, do you have a slide you want to bring up?
I am attempting to bring it up. There we go. Can we see it?
Perfect. Yep. Okay. So for the election of chair and vice chair, just a quick overview of how the process goes. The current chair, in this case, it's Commissioner Perez, will request nominations for chair. Those nominations do not require a second. And then the commission will vote on nominees in the order that they are so nominated. If we get to a point where we have a majority of votes in favor, then there will be no further voting. Once a new chair is elected, he or she will take the helm and will actually then conduct the election for vice chair using the exact same process that I just covered. So with that, Commissioner Perez, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so yes. Do I recognize Commissioner Grambois?
Well, I just have a question. What if we want to recommend someone who's not here? Is that still okay?
As long as the person is a current member of the Design Commission, that is great.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good incentive to get people to show up to these meetings.
Any other further questions right now before we kind of jump in?
Oh.
Yeah. So may I have a nomination for chair?
I nominate Colin Brandt.
Do we have any other further nominations? Okay, Andrea, if you could please take a,
I think we're going to do a thumbs up vote.
that's how we're gonna work it. Okay, thank you.
We just need to see if Commissioner Grambois can turn, oh, she did get her camera back on.
Do I call
So
the roll call or
you call the
do?
vote, you call the vote, and we can just do a thumbs up.
Okay, so do we do it one commissioner at a time or do we do it
Yep.
all?
We can all do it once. And since we only had one vote, we'll call a vote for Commissioner Colin Brandt to be Chair of Design Commissioner. Can we do a thumbs up vote, please, Commission? I see 1, 2, 5 votes for Colin. All right. Since Colin is here, we will ask Anthony to continue the call for election for a vice chair. It's the same process that Jeff outlined.
Okay, may I have a nomination for vice chair? I think I saw a hand up on Commissioner Grambois.
I'm sorry, I'm just on the couch with my 1-year-old. I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't fall off. So that was not a hand up to say anything substantively. I apologize.
So Andrea,
I'm going to defer to Jeff.
None of you get to leave tonight until, including Eileen's, who's going to do the ethics training. No one gets to leave until we elect a vice chair. So
I would be happy to nominate Commissioner Perez for vice chair.
Do we have any other nominations? Would you like to call for a vote, Commissioner?
Sure. Well, hang on. So yes. Andrea, could we conduct a thumbs up vote?
We can
For,
conduct a thumbs up vote. We have a motion on the floor, a nomination from Commissioner McPherson nominating Commissioner Perez for vice chair. Can I have a thumbs up vote, please, Commission? I see 4 thumbs and 1 looks like abstention. Commissioner Perez is the new vice chair.
Okay, well, thank
Could
you.
we ask Commissioner Perez if he's comfortable with that position?
Yes, I am comfortable with that position.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, Vice Chair, that I left the part about the bylaws out of the script, which was supposed to
Okay.
be the next item on the agenda. I have a slide for the bylaws, so let me bring that up.
Great, thank you very much.
And actually, while Andrea is doing that, I was remiss before the elections there to welcome a couple of new folks and one returning to the group here. So Suzanne, welcome back. I think you were gone for a few blinks of the eye, I believe, but we're glad you're back. And Catherine, welcome to the commission as well, newly appointed by the City Council, your first meeting. And yes, and I would also like to introduce our new principal planner, Tim McCarg. He has been with us since July, and he will be actually serving as your Design Commission staff liaison for work that will be coming forward to the commission for your review and your involvement. Andrea, you've probably heard the news by now, has accepted the position as the new city clerk, replacing Deb, who moved on. So we are currently in the process of recruiting for Andrea's replacement, and that process is underway and continues. So with that, Andrea will, Vice Chair, there's a hand up there. I'm not sure if you want to.
Yes, I can. Let's see here. I want to make sure I'm on the right parts here. So
Commissioner Grambois.
I have a question about the bylaws if we're going into that. I don't know if I should wait or,
Can let me do my real quick overview. And then that's a great time for a question.
perfect. Thank you.
So just real quick, there's one amendment that is being proposed by staff. Earlier this year, we amended the day of the week that the Design Commission holds their regular meetings, from the second and fourth Wednesdays to the second and fourth Thursdays. So we amended that in the bylaws, and that is the only proposed amendment from staff to your bylaws.
all right, good.
So now, Vice Chair, would be a great time to open the floor, and if commissioners have questions or would like to make amendments to the bylaws, would be a great time.
And that's different than the script that I've got here.
Because
So
I
what-
forgot to include bylaws in the script.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's open this conversation up. If there are specific bylaw questions, I want to make sure that we bring them to the floor and have consideration associated with that.
I have a
Sure.
question on whether we need to specifically state in the bylaws that we can have meetings virtually. It talks about a specific place, but I don't see anything noting that meetings can be conducted through Zoom or Teams.
Yeah, can you talk about, yeah.
That is a good question. I don't believe we have run that language through any other board or commission.
As I read the bylaws, all the meetings we've had
Mhm.
since we've been doing the Zoom platform have not been in compliance with our bylaws.
That is something I will want to consult with Eileen. Well, we do have an attorney here on site tonight, not one that was brought for this question, but do you, Eileen, in your experience, do you have an opinion on that?
Sure, and I pulled up your bylaws because I thought, hey, I'm here anyways, might as well make use of me. So your Article 3, Section 1 is somewhat broad because it says that you guys meet on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month, yada, 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 at Mercer Island City Hall or such other places the Design Commission may determine. And so I think that's broad enough where you could interpret it to mean if the Design Commission is determining to meet by Zoom, then you will meet by Zoom. So I think it's broad enough. If you guys want to tighten that up, you can, but I don't think it's necessarily a pressing issue. I don't think you've been in violation of it thus far.
And I would counter that with Zoom is not a place.
Well, Vice Chair, I'm not sure if there was a motion embedded in there, but there certainly could be some additional language added to that article that Eileen cited to be more specific if the majority of the commission is compelled to do so.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask to see if if there is a specific motion, and then we can proceed on how do we want to address this. So first request then would be, is there a motion?
I make a motion to amend the bylaws to specifically include virtual meetings.
And then this would bring up the point that there's going to have to be some language associated with that would not create an issue historically. So we need some information from the legal counsel on that.
And then one more process thing, Vice Chair. We need a main motion to approve the Design Commission bylaws before we can amend them.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so procedurally, let's do that first. What I'd like to be able to do is ask for motions from the commission for approving the bylaws as they have been presented.
I move to approve the bylaws as presented.
Do I have a
Second.
Now Tracy's motion is on the table and we just need a second for that if the commission, as the commission desires.
Point of inquiry, do we need to specify the language before the motion can be carried as to the placement or updated sentence?
If we get a second, then you guys can choose
Okay.
through friendly amendment to kind of massage it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second? I'm not hearing a second, Andrea.
If we don't get a second, then it drops and we can see if there's anybody else who would like to provide an amendment.
I'm hearing that then as a drop and open up the floor to a second amendment.
Tracy, was that a new hand or an old hand?
Hold hand, sorry, I took it down.
Just didn't want to leave you hanging.
Not hearing a second amendment or a second request for an amendment.
Yep.
I believe we can close.
Right, and then I'd like to do a roll call vote for the bylaws, please, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Will you
Vice
roll call?
Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yes,
I'll call it. And do you want to, you can call it if you'd like, but I can call it for you.
I'd like you to call it, please.
I would be happy to, Vice Chair. Commissioner McPherson,
I approve the bylaws.
Commissioner Ladigan, oh, can't hear you. There we go.
I approve the bylaws.
Commissioner Czar,
Approved.
Commissioner Grambois,
Approve.
and Vice Chair Perez.
Approved.
Thank you. The bylaws pass. Now we're back to the script and the script is on track.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We now move to the appearances portion of our agenda, where individuals wishing to speak live during the meeting may do so by telephone or by using the Zoom teleconferencing application. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak at the Design Commission on any item. All remarks will be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to individual commission members or staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive during addressing the commission, I may ask that that person leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the commission, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. City Clerk, is there anyone who signed up for appearances with wishes to address the Design Commission?
Thank you, Vice Chair. There was no one who signed up to speak tonight.
If there are no further appearances, we'll move on to the next agenda item. So here, the first item of business is going back a bit to May 13th, 2021, and the minutes associated with that.
And I come before the commission to, my week kind of exploded in front of me. The minutes that I was planning to finish for you all on Monday didn't get made to and still haven't gotten to it. So I'd like to beg the commission's forgiveness and ask to bring them back at your next Design Commission meeting where they will be finished and prepared for you.
Do we have to do them, as a point of clarification, do we have to do them, we have to do them in a public meeting for accepting the minutes, I assume? Okay.
We do.
All right, thank you.
I can send the minutes out to you all when I have them completed. They're almost there. They just weren't quite where I was ready to present them without another go through on them. So I'd be happy to email those out to the commission once I have them prepared for you, so you can have eyes on them way before we get to the next meeting, since we don't know when that next meeting will be.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Andrea.
I just got caught up in the transition of still doing my old job and doing my new job.
Okay. Next item of business then is 2021 Code of Ethics training. And if I have this correct, we are welcoming Eileen.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Eileen Kiefer. I'm with Madrona Law Group. I'm here because I essentially serve as backup for your regular in-house city attorney, Bio Park. And Bio and I have got our heads together, and we've created a PowerPoint presentation on City Council's new and improved Code of Ethics policy, adopted or really like revamped this summer. So I will get my PowerPoint going and we will get started. And one thing, just as a housekeeping measure, this is about a 40-minute presentation. I try to speed it up as much as I can, but I would very much welcome you to interrupt me as you have questions. It's a lot more dynamic of a presentation if we take questions as we go along, and honestly, it's easier to answer questions as we're talking about the topic. So feel free to stop me if you have any questions at all. Okay. And Vice Chair Perez, if there's a hand up or something and I don't see it, I'd love it if you flagged me. So thanks. Okay.
I'll also help you monitor that.
Great. Can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, again, welcome to your Code of Ethics training. At the outset, I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't give you a disclaimer. So we're going to give you the best ethics training we can give you with the best information we can give you. Taking this training is not going to be any defense against any ethics complaint. But what we're going to do today is just basically empower you to know where the Code of Ethics is, know where your resources are if you have any ethics questions, and know that there's multiple avenues available to ask for clarification if you end up in a situation where you think you may have questions or something that may violate the Code of Ethics. So we'll get into that later, but just needed to give you that little disclaimer at the top. Okay, so the first slide, this is going to be pretty straightforward, right? Why do we even have a Code of Ethics in Mercer Island? And the reason is to ensure that Mercer Island residents and businesses get fair, ethical, and accountable local government. And then it's obviously to protect the public trust in local government. And on this slide, I just want to orient you a little bit here too. I'm going to be talking today about both city code and state law. So where I have in the bottom right-hand corner of the PowerPoint slides, you'll see citations. So that's just to help orient you to, where is this coming from? Is it coming from the code? Is it coming from the statute? Sometimes it's coming from both places. And I'll walk us through where those two areas either overlap or sometimes they dovetail, and I'll explain that as we get into it. I also want to say, and I should have told you all this at the outset, this training really just covers ethics. You guys are, as the Design Commission, have other constraints that may apply to you, such as the doctrine of fairness doctrine, appearance of fairness doctrine. That's going to be a separate presentation, so we will not be covering that in today's presentation. Okay, so Mercer Island's Code of Ethics. Where does it live?
Eileen, I see a hand from Commissioner Grandbois.
Great. Commissioner Grandbois.
I was just wondering if this PowerPoint will be available.
It will. We will send this to you guys afterwards. Yep.
Thank you.
And so don't worry about like rushing to read it or anything like that. I'm going to be kind of giving you the high points, and we'll send it to you afterwards. Okay. So the city's Code of Ethics has been codified at Chapter 260 of the Mercer Island City Code. That's online. You can get it. It is up to date with the latest and greatest revisions made by City Council. It is supplemental to other law, including this particular chapter of the RCW, Chapter 4223, which is the Code of Ethics for Municipal Officers, and it covers contract interests. And as you're no doubt aware, it applies to city boards and commissions, which is why you're receiving this training today. Okay, so what does the Code of Ethics expect of city officials, so city board and commission members? Well, a lot of things that, again, should be probably common sense to you all. So honor and respecting the principles and spirit of representative government, complying with all laws and policies affecting the operations of government, conducting your official and your personal affairs in a way to maintain public confidence in city government, giving the clear impression that you cannot be improperly influenced in the performance of your official duties, being independent, impartial, and fair in judgment and actions, using your power and your resources of your public office to advance the best interests of the city, but not for personal gain. It expects that officials will conduct public deliberations and processes openly, unless legally confidential, in an atmosphere of respect and civility, and to be honest, fair, and respectful, and avoid conduct creating an appearance of impropriety. Okay. So now we go straight to the fun stuff, which is what can't you do under the Code of Ethics? What would a Code of Ethics be without telling you, long laundry list of things you can't do? Okay, so we'll go over first conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest are prohibited, as one would expect, under the Code of Ethics. And so if you guys ever find yourself in a situation where you have a conflict of interest, and we'll get to that definition in a second, you're going to need to take certain actions. Especially what you'll need to do is you'll have to recuse yourself from both deliberations or decisions in which you have a conflict of interest. So that means not just no voting, but no participating in the discussion at all. What does that mean in a Zoom format? Because you probably have no doubt seen people recuse themselves in person, which usually means leaving the room. For a Zoom proceeding, I would advise that you've got two options. One would be to turn off your video and your microphone, mute yourself for a recusal, or you could even leave the Zoom or the Teams invite and then have somebody like Andrea text you when it's time to rejoin. Either of those would work for an electronic recusal.
Looks like we might have another question. Did you have another question, Commissioner Grandbois?
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand again.
Okay. Again, feel free to interrupt me. It gets kind of boring if I'm just talking at you. So, okay. So what is actually a conflict of interest? So this is the definition that the code provides us. So it's anytime that you, your spouse, any individual with whom you live, and or an entity for which you serve as an employee, officer, director, trustee, partner, or owner, stands to incur financial gain or loss relating to a city decision. And I'm going to note too that for purposes of this definition, an owner is defined as someone owning 1% or more of the entity in question. So this is your definition of conflict of interest. It's somewhat narrow, and we're going to find out why as we move on through the slides. But it is more, again, it's a little more broad than one might think from a common sense standpoint. So again, like who you live with, not just your spouse, and then any entities you might be involved with. So be aware that's part of your conflict of interest definitions. Okay. Part of the fun of the Code of Ethics is it involves a lot of interlocking definitions. So again, we're going to go over these. You don't have to memorize them. I just want you to be aware they're there in the Code of Ethics. So if you think, oh, I might have a conflict of interest, you know where to find these. And you know that you can ask like me or BO. We'll go over the ethics officer and what his role is later. Again, just be aware of these concepts. So, okay. What is a financial gain or loss under the Code of Ethics? And it's any material financial gain or loss that an individual or entity stands to incur as a result of a decision under consideration by the city. There's some exclusions to this, and that's because some decisions are going to impact so many people that no one would ever be able to vote on them. So for example, the term doesn't include payment of generally applicable taxes or fees. And it also doesn't include financial interest shared with more than 10% of the city. Okay, so that was conflict of interest. So remember, conflicts of interest require complete recusal, no deliberations, no voting, no participation. Okay, appearance of conflicts. This is a separate concept. Sometimes you don't have an interest that is, technically falls under the definition of conflict of interest. I think what's much more common is actually having an appearance that there's a conflict of interest. And the Code of Ethics speaks to this and tells us what to do if you end up having an appearance of conflict. So first things first, how would you even know if you have an appearance of a conflict? Well, the code tells us that you have an appearance of a conflict if it would look to a reasonable person having knowledge of the relevant circumstances that the official's judgment could be impaired because of a personal or business relationship or a transaction or activity engaged in by the official. So this is a lot more broad than the definition of conflict of interest that we just looked at. So as you can see, like personal relationships, that's really broad, right? So we're not just looking at your spouse anymore or somebody who you live with. It can be your cousin, it can be your brother, it can be your business partner, it can be, all of these sort of personal things kind of get wrapped into this definition of appearance of conflicts. So just know that that's a broader definition. So that's why these are much more common. If you have an appearance of a conflict, what should you do? The good news is you can still participate. You just need to disclose. So the Code of Ethics calls on you to make a public written disclosure of the facts giving rise to whatever is causing the appearance of conflict before participating in the matter. If you want to recuse yourself, you're not required to, but it's not going to hurt you either. So just know, but the code at a bare minimum requires you to make this public written disclosure if you have an appearance of a conflict. Okay. Moving on to beneficial interests in contracts. So know that this is something that is prohibited not just by city code. This is where state law really comes into play. State law and city code prohibit officials from being beneficially interested in a contract that's made by or through them, or that could be made for the benefit of their office. And so this is a prohibition. This isn't something that recusal is going to solve. Unless there's an exception or an exemption, and we'll get to that in a second. This prohibition on having a beneficial interest in a contract, it also prohibits officials from accepting compensation, gratuity, or reward in a connection with a contract. So think of this as like finder's fees, commissions, that sort of a thing. Okay, so what is a beneficial interest in a contract? The code tells us that it is direct or indirect monetary or material benefit that would accrue to an official because of contracts or transactions that would be the subject of an official act or action by the city. There is an exception here. So contracts or transactions which confer similar benefits to all other persons or properties similarly situated is accepted from this definition. Just a word of caution here. There can be some overlap between the way the code defines conflict of interest with beneficial interest. Again, the conflict of interest requires recusal versus beneficial interest just prohibits those contracts from being formed at all. So just know that there can be some overlap there and some caution is warranted. Okay. Beneficial interest in contracts. I created some examples here for you so you just can have some idea. And I picked the lowest hanging fruit, which is council members here, because this is kind of the easiest way to think of it from my perspective of, you know, what is this prohibition trying to avoid? So for example, the city could not enter into an agreement with a professional services agreement to hire a council member's company. That would be a beneficial interest. Council couldn't form that contract. Similarly, contracts for supplies from the city from a company owned by a council member's spouse, or similarly, sale or lease of land by a council member to the city. These would be prohibited transactions. Obviously, the list of beneficial interest is infinite in theory, but these are just some concrete examples to give you an idea. Okay. There are some exceptions to this prohibition on beneficial interest in contracts. Those are specified in the RCW. I haven't given you the long laundry list here because it is indeed a long laundry list and you guys would absolutely fall asleep. But just know that not all the exceptions are applicable to Mercer Island. Some of them are applicable to much smaller jurisdictions, really small like population bounds. So that's why part of the reason I didn't list everything here. So just know that like if you have a beneficial contract issue, like just call BO, call me. If in doubt, inquire with us. You can also request an advisory opinion from the ethics officer, and we're going to get more in depth on that later. Okay. If you do have an exception to this rule against beneficial interest in contracts, then you would need to recuse yourself. Officials cannot vote in the authorization, approval, or ratification of a contract they're beneficially interested in, even if there's an exception. Also, the interest would have to be disclosed publicly and noted in the city's official minutes before the contract is formed. Okay. In addition to exceptions, the RCW also provides exemptions, which is, I think, a little bit confusing, but this is what we've got. So these exemptions are absolutely just excluded from the definition of beneficial interests. And they really cover these kinds of de minimis, really small interests that are so small that essentially it doesn't make a difference. So remote interests are things like being a non-salaried officer of a nonprofit corporation, being an employee or agent of a contracting party if you get just fixed wages or salary, so no commissions, so you couldn't profit off of that contract. That of a landlord or tenant of a contracting party, or being a holder of less than 1% of the shares of a corporation or cooperative who is one of the contracting parties. So again, these are remote interests. They're not a beneficial interest in a contract. However, remote interests must also be addressed, and it's going to be real similar to if you had an exception, as we discussed about earlier. Remote interests have to be disclosed and noted in the minutes. Officials who have a remote interest can't vote. And they also cannot influence or attempt to influence any other officer of the city to enter into the contract. Okay. Improper use of city staff time or property. Officials also can't use public resources that aren't available to the public. So I think the most concrete examples of these are things like, copiers. Don't be running off like 300 flyers for your garage sale on city copiers. Similarly, officials can't be using city staff time to do, sort of like personal research, that's sort of a thing. This is just designed to be a good safeguard of the taxpayer dollars. There is an exception for infrequent use at little or no cost to the city. So just no like de minimis use is going to be probably not a violation of the ethics code, but if it gets to be more than infrequent use, or if it's not at no cost to the city, you might rethink it. Okay. Officials also can't represent third parties at city proceedings generally, and we're going to get into what that means. So in the course of your official duties, you cannot appear on behalf of the financial interests of third parties before the bodies in which you serve or in interaction with assigned staff. Seems like a no-brainer, but there's actually case law on this. So certainly officials have been guilty of doing this before. So no representing the financial interests of third parties before the design commission as a design commissioner. This also applies to the city council. I'm just noting this for your interest. Council can appear on behalf of the financial interest of third parties before either themselves or any board, commission, or proceeding of the city, or in interaction with staff. Gifts and favors. This is actually my favorite one because I think this does come up a lot and can certainly be of interest to you guys. So officials can't take special advantage of services or opportunities for personal gain that aren't available to the public. There is a prohibition against basically like asking for or receiving gifts and favors. And we do have a long laundry list of exceptions, and I'm going to get to that. Okay, so no, the general prohibition is against gifts, but here are some exceptions. If you guys do such an amazing job, you end up getting some unsolicited flowers, plants, or floral arrangements, that's fine. Unsolicited promotional items or advertising of nominal values, so pens, maybe a notepad. If you do get an unsolicited promotional item as a design commissioner of an iPad, an unsolicited iPad, I'm not sure that's going to be nominal value, and you might think about returning that under the ethics code. You are also allowed to accept informational material, publications, or subscriptions relating to your performance of your official duties. I think most common are food and beverages. There's actually a couple of them, of these exceptions here in the ethics code. So if you're at a hosted reception in your capacity as design commissioner, you can absolutely consume food or beverages. Similarly, unsolicited gifts from dignitaries from another city, state, or foreign country. Every now and then that happens. If you get, a little trinket, it's supposed to be personal in nature, that's okay. Food and beverages, again, on infrequent occasions in the ordinary course of meals, if it's relating to your official duties. I'm going to note to infrequent occasions. So if this is becoming like a weekly occasion, again, you just might rethink like, ooh, does the ethics policy really let me do it? And then my favorite exception to the prohibition on gifts is gifts from family members or friends that are of a personal nature. So if your brother knits you a sweater, not a problem under the ethics code. Okay. I think we're at least coming to close to the end of the list of the ye shall not do section of the code, but we still have a few more to go. So the code does prohibit you all from disclosing confidential information. Officials can't disclose or use any confidential or privileged information that you got as on your role as a commissioner for other than a city purpose. And then, so for example, forwarding attorney-client privileged email or divulging contents of the executive session. I note too, I know we have a Parks and Rec commissioner here. I don't know if this will ever come up, but every now and then the city might be interested in purchasing property for a park. It might not be public information yet. This might be yet some other types of confidential information that you'd be kind of wanting to think about and thinking about safeguarding under the ethics code. I note too here, I'm not going to go over all of these. These are in addition to what the Code of Ethics prohibits. There's also some additional items in the statute for you to be aware of. There's a lot of overlap here because the statute is really sort of the floor, and I think the Code of Ethics adopted by the City Council kind of goes above and beyond the statute. I do want to note this one though here too. Municipal officers can't accept employment or engage in business or professional activity that the officer might reasonably expect would require them or induce them by reason of their official position to disclose confidential information acquired by reason of their official position. So just be aware of that, of sometimes, sometimes your job and your role as a city volunteer official can conflict, or other organizations you might be involved with. So that can definitely trigger some ethics issues. Okay. With that, I'm going to pause really quick before we get into the ethics officer's role. We are probably a little over the halfway point, which hopefully is welcome news. Are there any questions at this point? No? Pretty straightforward. It's not the, it's not the most exciting topic, but it is important. So I appreciate y'all hanging in here tonight. Okay, well, let's go over the ethics officer and what they do. So the city has hired an ethics officer. It's a male. So I'll use the he. He is responsible for the prompt and fair enforcement of the city code of ethics when he is asked to do so. And he essentially has two roles. So if he gets an ethics complaint, he investigates the sufficiency of that. We'll get into what that means in a bit. And then he also provides advisory opinions for officials who are subject to the code of ethics upon request. This can be a useful tool for officials. And so we'll get into how that works a little bit, just a little bit, or now. Advisory opinions. So know that you guys as board and commission members, you guys can request a written advisory opinion from the ethics officer about application of the code of ethics. You can ask him hypothetical questions or situations relating just to your circumstance, not others. The ethics officer is a bit constrained in what he can cover. So he can only cover the code of ethics and the RCWs on ethics. So he can't render opinions on like PDC matters, campaign matters, or public records matters. And he has the sole discretion to determine in what cases he'll issue an advisory opinion. When he's determining whether or not he's going to issue an advisory opinion, he's going to think about whether the issue presented has been recently addressed by the ethics officer, whether the issue presented is likely to be the subject of controversy or dispute, and the extent to which the requesting official has made prior requests for advisory opinions. I actually had a question at the last ethics presentation I did for the last group about what that last part means. Does that mean like, oh, if you ask for one opinion, are you basically like prohibited from ever getting other opinions? I don't think that's the way this works, but I think it's intended to avoid perhaps asking for too many and overburdening the ethics officer, but just because you ask for one advisory opinion doesn't mean you're like locked out of the advisory opinion process. So just wanted to clarify that. And then I note too, the ethics code provides that getting an advisory opinion is not a substitute for your own understanding of the code of ethics and exercise of reasonable judgment. And I want to note here too, and this will be in the slides we send you afterwards, the ethics officer typically has 45 days under the code to render an advisory opinion. 45 days is a super long time, right? Like, especially for a group like you guys, which apparently meet twice a month. You might need an answer more quickly than that, especially if you're asking about like, can I participate in, this vote or whatever. So if you need an answer quicker, you can tell the ethics officer that, and it should help. I'm not going to promise that you'd get an advisory opinion quicker, but my advice to you all would be, if you need an ethics opinion quicker than 45 days, put that in your request for an advisory opinion. Relying on advisory opinion. So why would you even want an advisory opinion? But here's the benefit, is not just to get like a third look and to get an objective opinion on your situation and whether or not it would be a violation of the code of ethics, but to the extent that you get an advisory opinion and then you rely on it, in a reasonable way, then that's a defense to, civil enforcement of the code of ethics. There's a couple of caveats here too, right? Like if you're relying on that ethics opinion to support your action, it's obviously going to be contingent on you've told the ethics officer everything that he needs to know. It's contingent on the advisory opinion saying that, yes, you can, take that course of action and it wouldn't violate the code of ethics. And it's obviously contingent on an official's conduct being consistent with that advisory opinion. Okay. I thought I had a slide here too on, here we go. I'm sorry. On how to make a request. And the way you would make that request is you can send it to Andrea and she forwards it on to the ethics officer. So just wanted to be clear about how the actual process works if you need to invoke it. It's all in the code as well, but I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Okay, moving on. The complaint process. I'm not going to belabor this too far. I'm going to give you kind of the bare bones of this because I'm hoping none of y'all are ever subject to the complaint process. But I want you to know that it's out there, and I want you to know kind of what that process looks like if you're ever subject to it, which again, hopefully you won't be. And then also what can happen to you if you do violate the code of ethics. This is going to cover that part. Okay. Complaint initiation. So any person, doesn't have to be a resident even of Mercer Island, can submit a written complaint to the ethics officer alleging one or more violations of the code of ethics by filing it with the city clerk. There are some safeguards to prevent against frivolous complaints. So for example, the complaint has to have specific facts with enough detail for the ethics officer to make a determination of sufficiency. They have to say what portion of the code of ethics they think were violated, and they have to sign it under penalty of perjury. And the ethics officer stands as sort of a safeguard again against complaints that might not be made in good faith, or just there may not be enough facts to go forward. So the ethics officer, upon receiving an ethics complaint, is going to make a determination of sufficiency within 30 days of receiving the complaint. And a complaint sufficient if it precisely alleges and reasonably describes acts that on their face would show a violation of the code of ethics, including also chapter 4223 RCW. A note on confidentiality. So obviously, while the code of ethics officer is even trying to figure out whether the complaint is sufficient enough to go forward, the city is going to attempt to maintain as confidential the fact that a complaint has been filed, the contents of that complaint, the identity of the official being complained against. But I'll note that this confidentiality provision has an except as otherwise provided by law exception. Know that the Public Records Act could potentially be one of these except as otherwise provided by law. So the code endeavors to protect confidentiality at this initial stage, but ultimately the city can't guarantee that. Okay. So once the ethics officer, the ethics officer is determining whether an ethics complaint is sufficient. If he determines the complaint is not sufficient, that the complaint provides too little detail for him to make a determination, or if he finds a violation might have occurred, but appropriate actions have been taken to address the unethical conduct, then he has to dismiss the complaint under the code. Okay. But if the ethics officer finds that the complaint is sufficient to move forward, then the complaint moves forward. And so complaints found to be sufficient by the ethics officer are conducted by the city hearings examiner. The city hearings examiners are sort of, I don't know how to describe them, they're sort of quasi-judicial proceedings. Right now they're happening via Zoom, but the city has contracted with the hearing examiner who would formally call a hearing. It's a bit like a court proceeding where parties get to cross-examine witnesses, put on evidence, give testimony before the hearing examiner. And the hearing examiner's job is really to prepare an official record of the hearing and make fact findings regarding the ethics complaint. Instead of a hearing, too, the ethics officer and the official who is the subject of the complaint can jointly submit a recommended stipulation to the city council. That stipulation would include relevant facts, the reasons the ethics officer thinks the stipulation is appropriate, an admission of the violation by the official, and a promise by the official not to repeat the violation. So basically, like if an official is subject to an ethics complaint and they said, you know what, this is true. I violated the code of ethics, but here, I'm not going to do it again. I've whatever the issue it is has been resolved, or I've taken steps to where it won't happen again. Then this is something that can be done in lieu of, the time it takes to go through a full hearing. Decisions. Okay, so if there was a hearing, within 30 days after conclusion of the hearing examiner will issue a final decision in writing. If he determines the alleged violations haven't been proven, then he dismisses the complaint, and that's that. No further actions taken, never goes to city council, that's the end of it. If the hearing examiner decides that one or more of the violations are proven, then the final decision will contain recommendations to be made to the city council. They are the ultimate city level authority on code of ethics violations for violations that have been proven. So the city council, once they get the hearing examiner's final decision, will determine what, if any, of the hearing examiner's recommended remedial actions or sanctions to adopt. And those will be decided by a majority vote in a public meeting. So possible outcomes here. The city council can decide no sanctions or penalties are appropriate. They may decide that, this is really a matter best referred to another agency, such as the Public Disclosure Commission for campaign violations. They can admonish an official, which is an oral non-public statement. They can reprimand the official by issuing a reprimand letter. They can censure an official, in which that letter is read to the official in public. They can refuse officials, and they can also impose civil penalties under the code. Finally, after the city council has made their decision, the complaining party or the official subject to the complaint can appeal that decision to the King County Superior Court by filing a writ of certiorari. Hopefully that would never happen, but it's definitely a possibility. So this is something the Code of Ethics does anticipate. Note too that this can also be made for if the stipulation, if the ethics officer and the official agree to a stipulation, that can also be part of this. And then finally, the Code of Ethics does provide a protection against retaliation. So the city itself nor any official cannot take or threaten to take any action that's a personal attack, harassment, or intimidation against any person because that person files a complaint with the ethics officer. And then a final note on public records. Records of the ethics officer or the hearing examiner on ethics complaints can be subject to inspection and copying by members of the public unless there's an exemption under the PRA. When the city receives a request under the PRA, and if they determine that there might be information that might be exempt from disclosure, then it will notify both the complaining party and the official who's subject to the complaint. This is called third-party notice, and we'll give them a certain amount of time to go get in a court order to enjoin that disclosure to protect that. And if no one gets a court order, then the city can release that information. Okay. Questions? That was a lot. I know it's not, I'll be honest, it's not the sexiest of topics, but again, it is one of interest and one that's very important too. Commissioner Grandbois, do you have your hand up?
Who is the ethics officer?
It's Jeremy Columber of Keating Buckland.
Thank you. I'm going to put my hand down now.
Okay. And I'll note too, so the ethics officer is a lawyer by training, but he is not a lawyer for the city. So just want to make that distinction.
And contact information is available through Andrea, is that right?
Yes.
Or it would be through.
Well, if you were requesting an advisory opinion, you would request it through Andrea. And one thing that BU and I can do as well too is if you guys are wanting to request an advisory opinion and you want just like an initial look of like, do I even have enough to send to the ethics officer? Feel free. Or if you want to just call us and be like, do you think I should request an advisory opinion? Or, because I mean, that's the thing is that we're here to help you too, and we can help point you to places in the Code of Ethics, the RCW. Again, not expecting y'all to memorize any of this. We want you to be able to issue spot if issues do come up for you guys in your personal and professional capacities.
Fantastic. I want to thank you very much for the information.
Sure. Well, thanks y'all. This has been, you guys have been troopers through this. Again, it's a bit dry sometimes, but important. And we'll send the slides. So if you guys have questions after this, feel free to get in touch. We're around.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, y'all.
Thank you very much. This brings us to other business, and kind of brings me up to Tim McHarg, Principal Planner for the Principal Planners Report. Hello, Tim.
Hey, thank you.
Can I jump in
Thank you.
real quick, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jody, if you'd like to leave, you're welcome to leave. You don't have to stay and listen to the rest of their business if you would like to go.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. So yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Tim McHarg. As Jeff mentioned, I've been with the city since mid-July, so still cutting my teeth, but thank you for having me to my initial meeting to get that over and done with. Hopefully next time we'll have a more exciting and typical meeting for the Design Commission.
Yeah.
Basically, my report is going to be brief tonight. We've got a couple of items that are kind of percolating, going through the review process. They're not quite ready to schedule any type of formal review or study session with the Design Commission. We'd like to get those to you hopefully by the end of the year, but that may not be possible given kind of the holiday schedule. So one is a row house project, and the other is the redevelopment of the Shell station, which I believe you've already considered as part of a study session item. So those have some work to do before they're ready to bring forward to you, but we will do our best to get them to you as quickly as possible. I think Jeff really stole my thunder by making all the announcements at the head of the meeting, so I don't really have anything in addition to that, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have either for myself or for Andrea.
Oh, this is Tracy Grandpa. Hi.
Hi.
Can you update on what's going on with Xinhua project?
So they are in building permit review process right now. So We will be, actually, we're anticipating issuing, there's been some kind of additional environmental review that's been going on for that project subsequent to the Design Commission approval. So we anticipate that that additional environmental review will be wrapped hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, so that we can issue a notice of decision in the weekly permit bulletin on Monday for the Design Commission's final decision. And then behind the scenes, obviously, there's a lot of work going on relative to reviewing the building permit application.
Can
Thank you.
share-
Sure.
This is Commissioner Perez. I believe that I saw an invitation for the row house project for this particular meeting. Was there a delay on our end, on the city's end, or was there a delay on the applicant's end?
No, there's no delay. It's a little in that they've submitted 2 applications simultaneously. So they submitted a study session application and a formal design review application. So because we have to process that formal design review application pursuant to statutory requirements, 120 days, basically,
Okay.
have to kind of give them comments on the formal application. And in this case, it's not actually a bad thing from my perspective, at least, in that by kind of doing an initial review of the formal application, it gives us better assurance. It gives the applicant better assurance, and the Design Commission, more importantly, better assurance that there's not going to be major changes from what you see at the study session to the formal application, at least because of city review comments. Now, obviously, they will have to respond to the Design Commission's comments that they hear at the study session and bring those forward, but it's not going to be as if we haven't performed at least an initial technical review to identify major issues that would require significant external changes to the structure in between those 2 reviews.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
I think we can move on if that's the end of your report, Tim.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that, anytime you have questions about a project that's on your agenda, a project that you've heard about, a project that you just have general inquiries about, I mean, I'm always available to meet by phone, someday, hopefully again in person. So you know how I can help, either get you information to make the best decisions that you can, or alternatively, just general questions about how the review process works or the status of individual projects. So I'm here as a resource at any time for you as commissioners.
We welcome you aboard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Really appreciate it. I think our next order of business, Andrea, is if there are any commissioner absences that are forthcoming.
It's a harder question since we don't know when things are going to come forward.
Right.
So
it sounds like we may have a meeting by the end of the year, but it's not assured in any way yet.
That's correct.
Typically, it looks like it's about a 30-day notification. Does that sound about right still?
It is, yeah, for any public hearing requires a 30-day notification. So as we get into November here, we would have to notice that in order to make that first December meeting for the commission. I believe it's customary, and Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't hold a second meeting in December typically. So it's
that is
the
correct.
first meeting, the first meeting, or it will be pushed to January. So I should know that probably in the next couple of weeks, based upon what we get from the applicants and kind of where the process stands.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, because both of the November meetings have been canceled because they both fell on holidays.
And canceled or postponed?
Canceled. Canceled.
Okay. All right. All right, very good. So announcements and communications.
It's just if any commissioners had anything that they wanted to share with the commission. If no one has anything, I'll take a minute because it might be my last meeting with you guys, depending on when the
Oh,
commission
Pshaw.
comes
Yeah.
back.
How can we
And
do
I
this
just wanted to
fun?
thank you guys. It's been a pleasure getting to work with you over the last 4 years or so. I've really enjoyed my time with you guys. I will still be supporting you guys in a slightly different way, and you'll still hear from me about OPMA and that kind of thing. And if you have questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. You've been invaluable.
Absolutely. All right. That brings us to the end, I think, Vice Chair.
Okay, well, I would like to engage Commissioner Lanigan just to do a brief introduction. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
If I may be so bold to ask.
Oh, that's entirely possible from my perspective. I'm a little unfamiliar with all of your meeting process, but yes, I've lived on Mercer Island since the late 90s. Started out living on the North End, and I live now sort of near Ellis Pond. I work as the real estate program manager for Primera, where I have a hand in right now 2 campuses. One's a 36-acre campus, and we're just starting a new one in Spokane. I've actually worked with Suzanne Czar over many years back in the day when Amazon was a much smaller company and they weren't quite in South Lake Union yet, so we have that in common. Yeah, I'm excited to see how I can contribute. I love living in Mercer Island and interested to see the process through this filter. So thank you for inviting me. Anything else I can answer?
Thank you
Okay.
for participating. Thank you for stepping up.
Sure.
So I think that with that, the next design commission will still be determined. There's still no other business before the next design commission. And the time is now 7:15. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.